Well, hey guys, welcome into the Next Man Up podcast. I'm Mark Stanifer. I'm joined by John Gregory, and together we are both honored to be with you for another episode. Whether you're joining us today for the first time or you've been with us for a while, thank you for being part of this community that is about raising and being healthy and godly men. And if you want to connect with us, feedback at thenextmanup.com is a great way to do it. You can also check us out on the web at thenextmanup.com or on Facebook at NMU Journey. John, good to see you, man. How are you?
What's up, G2?
G2 and G4 in the house. Hey, I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
This will tie into where we're going today. What was or were nicknames for you when you were younger?
Mm-hmm. So my dad loved nicknames, and there's four of us kids. I'm the lone son, but all of us had nicknames, and they had. When you hear them, you're like, "Oh, okay." So I had several because he would just throw them out, and some of them stuck. Boney Maroney was one.
Boney Maroney. No context, no inspiration?
Have no idea.
Okay.
No idea. I can't remember the one. This is in the 70s. The sitcom with Jimmy Walker, I think was the character's name. He'd say, Dynamite. For some reason, he called me the white Jimmy Walker. I have no idea why he did that. And then what was the other one I was trying to remember the other day? Oh, Johnny Jump Up.
Jump Up?
Johnny Jump Up.
Did you have
apparently, I was probably a little more active and lively and rambunctious at that age than I am at age 54.
Okay. Maybe you had ups as a kid.
I had something.
At least a nickname.
How about you? What was yours?
Yeah. So the consistent one all through high school, college, and even today in the right group, those high school friends, those college friends, it was Stanny. That was an easy one. It was on all of the athletic fields or courts. It was easy. But I had forgotten until you started talking that one of my closest friends in high school, his dad would give his son's friends nicknames. And he called me Stickman. And I don't know why. This guy was probably 6 feet tall, and at the time felt like he was 6 feet wide. He was a large dude. Clearly, I am not in stature or in girth. So maybe that had something to do with it. There was another friend in the trio, and I cannot remember his nickname, but it was something along the lines of being tall and lanky and thin, and so maybe that was it. But Stickman was what he called me, and he was the only one. It was just his thing and kind of that circle. But those were the two that I can remember from back in the day for sure.
Yeah, I tend to drive people a little crazy because I like nicknames myself. I tried to curb it, but occasionally I'll come up with just like that. I'll just come up with one nickname. Nobody else calls this person that name, and it says something to me in that person. It's sort of a, well, we don't need to go down that road. I tend to do the same thing. Let's just put it that way.
Well, we kind of started that way with G2 and G4.
There you go. Exactly.
I don't know if that was intentional because of the topic or if it was just inspired, but
yes,
we'll give you credit for both. Did you ever feel? Do you ever remember feeling like the nickname was something you didn't like?
Some of those from my dad just didn't make sense. To me as a kid, it was more about, well, I didn't know what it was about. So if I didn't know what it was about, then it was just like, okay. I think if they had some more meaning behind them, that he and I both understood what they were, that would have been different. I don't know. I guess Boney Maroney sort of, as I got a little more self-aware, that one may have been a little self-conscious orienting, but I mean, I never was like, stop calling me that. I never did that.
I When I was early in my professional career, I was working with a pretty close team. Um, we had a lot of trust with each other, for each other, and enjoyed working together. But I took it too far one time. I took one of the guy's last names and I turned it into something he didn't like.
Hmm.
And I didn't mean any offense by it, but clearly offense was taken. I'm like, okay, that needs to go.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna stop that there. But I look back on some of my life prior to that and think I just wasn't aware. I wasn't clueless. There
Mm-hmm.
was a guy in college. I think he was in the class above me whose nickname was Chins. I only knew him as Chins. I wasn't really that close to him, but everybody else called him Chins, so I called him Chins. And whenever we interacted, and a name was needed, like, "Hey Chins, what's up?" I used Chins. And it wasn't until much, much later I realized, oh, there's a reason he has that nickname. And it's because he had more than one chin. He was a chubby guy. And I'm like, how did I not see that?
Mm-hmm.
Like, where was my own head and my own focus that I thought I was just being fun with this guy and I was going with what everybody else called him. And my guess is that nickname came with him to college and other people just picked up on it. I don't think that nickname started in college, but honestly, I don't know. I just remember when I realized that that was kind of a derogatory name. I'm like, crap. I didn't even think about the impact that this nickname is having on
Mm-hmm.
this guy.
Yeah, I won't repeat the nicknames my dad had for my three sisters because they had that kind of tone to them. And I've never asked my sisters, so how'd you feel about that nickname? But they certainly, I know one particular in my brain. I think they have power behind them,
Mm.
whether you mean for them to or not, or whether you're aware of the power or not. They definitely have some power.
So you brought this idea, this topic of what's in a name forward because you had a bit of an awareness moment that like often becomes an inspiration for something to write about or to sing about or to talk about here. What was that story for you?
So I have a friend that I met 2010, I think, something like that, 2009, 2010. And so we're adults when we meet, and I'm just calling him by the name everybody calls him. I'm assuming that's his name, that he goes by. And we met at church. He's a runner, so we uh, started traveling and doing races together and stuff like that. So I've always called him by the same name I'd always heard it, called. The first time I called his office, he answered the phone with a different name.
Mm.
I was like, hi. uh, what's that about? Because we had that kind of relationship. He's like,
Yeah.
well, at work, I go by this name. I'm like, okay. That's all he ever said to me. He didn't go into any kind of storyline or anything. So he since has two different other ways that we're connected. One is through a friend that he has a relationship with, a mutual friend of ours. And then he's also in a different line of work. And with the other friend and at his other line of work, he goes by this name that he knew he had at his other job. So it just sort of came to me as I asked his partner, who's a really close friend of mine. I was like, why do you call him that? She's like, because that's his name. Uh, I get it. But everybody else that knows him from all of his life, they called him this other name. Like, she's like, that's his actual name, John.
Mm.
Like, okay, I hear that, but so I just had to walk through that and realize he's had to walk through that too, was where I landed. And at some point, he made a conscious choice. There's some places in his life that it's okay to be called that name, probably that he was called as, an elementary student, whatever. I still haven't asked him what's the deal because I don't know that he would tell me. But uh, he's made a clear line that in his work life and new relationships as an adult, it's a different name. And that was just an interesting thought to me. I'd have somewhat of experience of this myself. I'm a junior. My grandfather and my dad had the same first name as I do. So when I was a kid, I was called Johnny. My dad was, well, it depends on where we were, but in the family, my dad was called John B, and my grandfather's called John. So it's John, John B, and Johnny. So I grew up with Johnny all my life, and I made a conscious choice when I went to college. The knee was going away. It's just going to be John when I went to
Why?
college.
Do you remember why?
No one ever had a conversation with me about it. I never talked to anybody about it, sort of like my other friend. I had a clear point, I think, just personally, it's like, I'm an adult, and as an adult, I want to be called John. It's just that simple. I felt like for some reason, and probably there's some psychology here, but being called Johnny was not respectful as an adult. Not to disrespect anybody who goes by Johnny, but I just felt like, all right, I'm going to say that as a man and as an adult, I'm going to be called John. I'm not going to be called John anymore. Of course, my dad had passed away, so I had the opportunity to make that choice on my own. I didn't talk to anybody in the family about it. They still call me Johnny. Like, I'm not going to force them to do that. That's unnecessary. But that was pretty much the thinking behind it.
I know this is a objection calls for speculation question here.
Right.
But if your dad were still around
Mm-hmm.
and he were calling you Johnny, how do you think that would feel, or how do you think you would have reacted to it?
I think it would still be fine because, again, like when I go back to Alabama where we lived when I was, a young kid, everybody still calls me Johnny, unless they've seen, oh, on Facebook he goes by John. What should I do? Same kind of thing that I do with my friend. Uh, I don't care. I'll answer to whatever you call me. It's just that simple. So I don't think it would be that big of a deal. He and I probably would have had a conversation about it. As far as he probably would have asked me, why are you going by John? And I would have explained that. I don't think he would have objected to it. It's like, you can keep calling me Johnny, but in work life and yada, yada, I'm going to be called John.
Yeah. As I was thinking about this idea, it seems like sometimes each of us are different, and we can receive and we can respond different. But it seems like sometimes the changing of the name can really represent this demarcation, this milestone of that's the past, and this is the future. And as I played with that thought, there were a number of things that came to mind. But even somebody I've been working with and have become friends with over the last couple of years, he added Sir, SIR, to his first name, David. And not in a formal way like change birth certificate and driver's license, but in the way that he refers to himself and invites other men to refer to him. Sir David for him means this is who I'm becoming. David was the birth name. Adding Sir to it for him elevates it to this level of warrior for good, warrior for God, like just this warrior type of mentality. And it's been significant for him, significant to represent the identity of who he wants to be and where he's moving with his life. Like that's one dude, one small little change, but for him it's super significant. And so it just really feels like there's something here with changing name, either changing away from a nickname or adding a nickname, or like there's a before and after component to this that maybe I hadn't really thought through before really coming into this conversation.
You just led me to remember hearing some comedians talk about their bringing up, and their nickname, well, they joke, but they always thought their name might have been like asshole,
Right.
or something like that, because their parents called them that all the time.
Right.
I mean, they're joking, but at the same time, there's some relevance there.
There is.
That if you use whatever language you use to get your child's attention, you're saying something with that. And if you choose, I'm getting really deep here for a moment, but if you choose to use whatever other words besides their actual given name, whether you mean it and explain it or not, your kid is hearing something that you may or may not want them to hear.
So many different thoughts, John. When we named our kids, it was a process because we knew we were giving them something that was going to be with them for the rest of their lives. And there were some criteria that came into it from my perspective, and some from my wife's perspective. But we didn't do it in the way that you read in the Old Testament, where a barren woman finally is given the gift of a child, and she names that gift in Hebrew something that's the equivalent of joy or God's favor, right? Like there's so many times going back through the Old Testament where the name is associated with a gift or a prophecy or significant meaning such that it's defined. And I'm not necessarily saying that that's how we should do, but we've lost a lot of that with where we are today. And so I don't know that names capture our attention in the same way that they did 5, 6, 10,000 years ago. But there's a precedent there that when you go back and read the text and look at what was happening, like the name given to that child had significance beyond novelty, or had meaning that was more than just what's happening here as a kid is being birthed. I feel like I kind of mumbled my way through that. I must be making some sense because I can see you nodding.
Well, you did more than just pull out the latest, I forget what it's called, but the latest edition of the most popular names,
Right.
and pick from the list. That's you're hinting that, can we please do more than that? Well, I don't know if you're really hinting that. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but there used to be a time where parents and the culture around them expected more.
So we did use the books because that's what we do. We research and we were curious, right?
Yeah.
It's also prompting me to remember that because my wife was a teacher for a period of time before, there were certain names that were off limits because those names represented children from a classroom. And she's like, I don't want to think of that child every
Mm.
time I refer to my child. Again, names matter. There's an association, there's a significance there. So I don't know in your pastoral experience and your training how much you got into this, but this was new for me. So I'm reading again through the Old Testament. I'm actually following a Bible Project app that suggests certain themes and threads to follow as you read through the text. And it's been very interesting. But one of the things that I learned is that prior to Moses, God revealed himself as El Shaddai. That's how pre-Moses the Hebrew people understood him to be. And then there's this great encounter as Moses is trying to figure out how his life got interrupted through a bush that was on fire but not being consumed, and a voice that was speaking through that, and like what just happened here. Moses asks this question, basically, who are you? So
Mm.
if I'm going to go do your work and I'm going to represent you on behalf of people, I'm going to represent you to people. Who are you? How do I refer to you? And those that know the story know the answer. It is, I am. But the Bible Project interpretation and behind additional insight behind it said, what I am has now been translated to is the third person form of the Hebrew word to be. So God says, I am. We refer to him as you are in that third person form versus the first person form. I'm conjugating verbs here for those who care to know. And it's translated as Yahweh.
Mm-hmm.
And so hundreds of years in, we now have a new name and a new way to identify with God. Thousands of years in at this point, in effect, God changes his name for us. And so there's the before and there's the after. And I think that just again speaks to the significance of the words, the names, the season, the implication of what we are using to refer to one another. And it also makes me very conscious of the influence that we have as dads in particular in how we're referring to our sons.
Mm-hmm.
We talk all the time about that transition from boy to man, and we have a window of opportunity as dads to influence that transition. But have we ever thought about the name? The names that we're using for our kids, whether given or nickname, before becoming a man, and then even after becoming a man. It's very contextual, and it's personal for everyone. But it's a reminder that names matter. And as dads, even how we refer to or what we call our boys can empower them and encourage them in their journey from boy to man.
Yeah, the word that's coming to me is intentionality.
Mm.
So, and I'm going to say that's on behalf of the dad, dad and mom here. Um, we're suggesting it would be nice to have some intentionality about the actual given name of your kid. But I think there's good suggestion, not unlike other things that the Next Man Up is about, is having intentionality about, let's say, what you start calling your son when he becomes a father. Or is there something different? What do you, well, I'm good down all kinds of lanes here for a second.
Yeah.
What do you call your son in front of your grandchildren? Is it something different? Have you even thought about that? Um, when it's just the guys around, so to speak, is there a space that you can have more of the buddy name, whatever that name is, that nickname kind of thing that indicates something different to your son that is actually quite meaningful? Or when you're just alone on a hike, I know that because I am one of those nicknamey kind of people, I think there's value to that, and just thinking through that and not being haphazard.
I had a difficult conversation with my dad a couple years ago, and it had been kind of stirring in me for a while, but I chose the wrong time and the wrong way to really bring it out. I handled it
Mm,
really poorly.
mm,
And we've since worked through it. Dad's great. I've told that story and talked about him on numerous occasions. I'm so fortunate and blessed to have the dad that I do. But there was a way that he referred to me that it just grew to mean something different to me, and I didn't like it. And again, I completely fumbled in how I had the conversation, but I had the conversation. And to his credit, he's made a change. And I look at that and think, after how many, well, let's see, what, I'm 49. So after 49 years, at the time I was 47, of referring to me consistently this way that meant something to him, he was willing to honor me and make a change. And it was interesting early on. After that, he would apologize every time he would go back to that
sure.
name.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like, Dad, it I'm not asking for an apology. I just want you to know how I'm receiving that and what I would like. And we're now past that. I'm sorry. I'll do better next time phase. And it just feels more comfortable and more natural now. But like at 47, like there's something that was irritating, and because of our relationship, I was able to express it. He was able to give me grace and forgiveness for being a bonehead and how and when I did it. And we've now, from my standpoint, gotten to a better place. We've talked about it a couple of times, and I don't know that he fully understands, but he's honored me. And I think that's the message that I take away from that, is being able to honor your boy, honor your man, honor your child with how you call him, whether it's a
Mm-hmm.
nickname or the given name, whatever it is. Just recognize that names have significance, and even late into their life, like you said, how do you refer to your son when he's a father? There's an opportunity for us as dads to continue to speak life and breathe life and wind into the lives of our boys, and through names, through how we refer to them.
So I'm going to ask you a question as a dad, and along the lines of next man up, journeying kind of language we use. Let's say you've been calling your son, uh, tadpole just came to my mind. I don't know why the word tadpole came to my mind, but whatever the word is, booger, bubba, whatever. You've been calling them that because that's what you called them, as this cute little word that just stuck when they were a toddler. And you continue calling them that, and now they're 8. My question is, what might be the value in actually talking to your son about, I'm not going to call you this anymore, and here's why?
I think that's a rich opportunity, because it's not just deciding to make a change and leaving your child wondering what happened. Because it could be that pet name, that nickname really is that special thing between me and my dad. And all of a sudden my dad's not referring to me that way. Like, what happened? Or it could be that irritant that the boy wants to be rid of, but giving them an explanation behind why you're aware, why you're sensitive, and why you're suggesting moving into a different phase, a different season. And even as your boys get older, giving them the opportunity to select what they would prefer, like it communicates a why, which is super helpful in understanding what's behind decisions. And it allows the boy to have some say. Again, it's like, I'm honoring your opinion here. What do you think? What do you want? Because here's what I'm feeling and here's what I want out of this. But what do you want? What do you prefer?
And we have, I hadn't even thought about this till we're discussing this. God has already illustrated this in scripture with certain people. We know he had conversations with them and said, I'm no longer, or your name is no longer this, now it's this.
Mm-hmm.
And here's why.
Mm-hmm.
So why wouldn't we? It's fine to call your 3-year-old that pet name, whatever that is. Probably not fine to call them that at age 18 when they're walking across getting their diploma at graduation. Probably not good. Please don't scream that out. Don't embarrass them. Have this conversation and actually help promote them is a word coming to me, but use the word honor, help them move forward, that my dad really does see me differently.
Yes.
And I can actually stand up to, and I want to pursue what he is establishing as how he sees me.
Yeah. That right there is a much simpler way to capture what I was feeling when I had the conversation with my dad. But it took me 27 years to get there. So,
and there's a whole lot of reasons for that, right?
There is, for sure.
And every family dynamic's different. Every obviously every relationship's different. So this is really good. To me, it's helpful. I would find it helpful if I were a dad to pause and think about, okay, I tend to give nicknames. Is that good? Have I screwed up my kid with the name that I've been calling him? And is it time to stop?
Yeah. So this, all change starts with awareness. And I think what we're after in this conversation is just creating some awareness of, like you said, how can you be more intentional in the process of raising your boy to become a man, including through the names that you use to refer to him? Or as a healthy and godly man yourself, how can you assess the names that you are referring to others? Is that name that you think is cute and special and funny that you refer to your wife as really so cute and special and funny? Even in your family, John, some of the names, the nicknames for your sisters, did they communicate beauty and value and honor beyond a physical appearance or a personality tendency or whatever? Like, how are you, I keep coming back to honor, but how are you honoring folks with the names, including your boy, and celebrating the transition that he is he's undergoing?
And if the awareness does bring up, like, oh man, I don't like where we are. Totally fine. I have to sit in the guilt of that. Just have the conversation. If you feel like you need to ask forgiveness, be a man and do it. But do something with that awareness that is healing for everybody.
Yeah. And therein lies the journey of growth. We find those moments of tension or discomfort, and we don't hide from them. We don't run away from them. We actually lean into them, and we own what is our stuff. Maybe we did an episode on that. We own what's ours to own, and we continue to invest in those relationships, including through apologies and asking for forgiveness and all of that. This is just another way to come at some of those same themes. So you're right, John. Don't sit in it. Just address it, fix it, make it better, and move on. Do what's yours to do, and then just trust that the relationship will get better as a result. Well, guys, I don't know what you're hearing, what you're taking away from this. Maybe this is just two dudes overthinking something, but I tend to think not. There's so many examples from Scripture, as John mentioned, where there is a before and after, that names matter, that they're defined, that the way someone refers to someone else actually communicates who that person is. And we're not saying that we are just our names. We're more than our names, but names do matter. That's what's in a name. And so as you're processing this, as we do at this point in our episodes, I would just challenge you to figure out what opportunity you have to make a change in your life. Maybe that's as a dad, maybe that's as a peer, maybe that's as a son yourself, whatever it is. If you spend a minute or two thinking about it, reflecting on the conversation, even making notes on some of the things you heard, it will surface. And as it does, chances are the next best step for you will surface as well. And so do that. Whatever that is, go do that with intentionality and with a desire to continue to grow in being a healthy and godly man and teaching your boy how to be a healthy and godly man. All right. John, this is the part where I never know what you're going to say, but I always pause and say, any last thoughts or comments?
Well, maybe I should ask you, does it bother you that I call you G2? Should I ask that question?
It does not.
Okay, good. We've cleared the air.
We have cleared the air.
Fantastic.
Okay. Well, folks, we have a good episode coming up next week that actually, as a little teaser, does have some component, some tie-in to what we're talking about this week with the guest's name and where that name came from and what it's come to mean for who he is today. So looking forward to dropping that next week for you. But until then, as we always do, we'll remind you, same bat time, same bat channel. Next week, guys. Adios. To send us your comments or questions, you can email us at feedback@thenextmanup.com. The theme music is by Jacob Stanifer at Jacob Stanifer Music, and this show is part of the NRT Podcast Network.